Everyone knows what it's like to work for someone else. The thing that we don't talk about is owning a business can suck.
And that's very, very similar to almost all the YouTubers we've talked to, where if they don't wake up and work on a video, nothing has happened that day. There's a big difference between somebody being reasonably successful and having promise, and then all of a sudden the switch is flipped and you're a bum. That strains personal relationships of all kinds.
You need to contextualize the payday and hope that it's more than you would have been paid had you just worked another job. The difference is not my problem versus all my problem.
All my problem is fatiguing. It just happens to be very different than the list of bullshit you had when you were a pauper.
Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. It is smoky out there, but we are doing our best. We are fighting through this apocalyptic earth to come to you to discuss something that I think should be discussed because no one talks about it. I'm Kevin Lieber, and with me as always is Matthew Tabor.
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize to for the both of us straight away because the smoke is an actual problem. This is another lemonade day because I can't make my throat even worse than it already is from the Canadian invasion of smoke. It's 1814 all over again with threats from the north. But it's a real thing. It stinks like burning garbage, like inside my house. It really has come through everything. And yeah, it's a little bit of throat scratch. But we have good news, Kevin, and bad news. I want to hit a couple good newses and bad newses real quick.
I didn't know we had any newses, so I'm interested to learn what they are. Okay, lay it on me.
So number one, Bagel, happy birthday. Bagel has been around since the beginning. And so I enjoy Bagel's sports tweets throughout the seasons. You know, it's nice when somebody is a fan of something all year long, as opposed to like just the Red Sox people I follow who are, boring as hell 8 months out of the year. Anyway, happy birthday, Bagel. Also, quick congratulations to NRM, who is moving up in the world. Got some really good news professionally. And it's extremely exciting. And we've said this before so many times, but hearing the good news that you have and the life advancements and just things working out, and even when they don't work out, just, you tried and failed, whatever. It's awesome. It's awesome to hear about what you're doing and to follow along with people over months and years. And this is just huge for NRM, and I'm excited. The bad news. Did you know? I think this just broke. Did you know that the Iron Chic has died?
I just found out on Twitter. Yeah, TCU's own Charles Kahn informed me through a retweet about how Hulk Hogan's number one enemy has moved on from this mortal plane and is now probably typing in all caps. In the afterlife.
Did you watch the documentary about him?
No.
I think it was on Netflix. Oh, I got to see what it's called because it was really, really good. It's about 10 years old. Yeah, it's just called The Shake. And it obviously goes through his life and all of that. But it really was the beginning of that public presence that he's had for so long, like being amazing on Twitter. Just seeing that he was such a character. It's like, no, we need to show people a lot more of this. But it's really neat to see him go into the details of his career and his life, because it's pretty unique to have somebody be a heel and be so happy with being a heel over decades. And it's actually really hard to do, to be the bad guy in different ways for like 40 years. It's hard to keep that up and keep it entertaining. There are a lot of ways to be a good guy. it's tough to be the bad guy and stay interesting. So anyway, check that out. RIP to the Sheik.
Absolutely.
Bad news, but
yeah.
you know, what can you do?
Hey, look, when it comes to like the average life expectancy of wrestlers, Iron Chic did pretty well for himself.
Okay.
I think he lived to 81.
Yeah.
That is, that's like 400 in wrestler years. So
right. Yeah, he's the Methuselah of wrestling.
Yeah. So he did pretty well for himself. Well, lately sort of on this podcast, something that I've been really excited about doing is sort of having conversations that I don't feel like other people are having, or pointing things out that no one seems to point out, or sort of noticing patterns that no one else seems to notice, or if they do, they stay quiet about it. And the one that I wanted to discuss today has to do with being a business owner, and it has to do with starting a business, owning a business, running a business, because I think that we all know what it's like to be an employee. Everyone listening to this podcast, you and I, have been employees many times over in different industries. Everyone knows what it's like to work for someone else. So we are all really personally, intimately familiar with all the ways in which that blows. It blows when you're undervalued. It blows when you're not getting paid enough to do the things that you want to do. It blows when you are passed over for a promotion, or you're feeling stuck. It blows when you don't fit in or get along with your coworkers, or you just hate your boss and, he's a jerk. There are many, many ways. Just waking up at a certain time, or they change some sort of protocol and now you have a responsibility that you shouldn't be doing, and now you're doing two people's jobs because they fired one of them. There are many different, spokes in the employee wheel that end up sucking really hard. And I think that we're all familiar with them and are sort of inundated often with hearing other people's stories about in which ways that their job sucks and they're getting screwed over in some way. Do you think that's a fair characterization of the general landscape around the topic of work?
It is, and there's so much more to it. But like everybody knows too that if one of the worst things you can be as an employee is really good at your job, because it almost certainly means that you're going to be thrown more and more stuff to do, and it's unlikely that you'll get any additional benefits or compensation for some time.
Which was the point of that quiet quitting thing that we had a whole podcast about. That's why people do that.
Yes. No, and I understand the impetus for that. And it requires a tremendous amount of patience and faith that, the good things are going to pay off, and resilience when they don't. It's tough. It's really hard. And it's, just on the personal fit side, I think this is something that matters much, much more than it used to. It matters to people more, where they want to feel comfortable on a social level with their jobs and the people they're working with.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a trope. If you watch TV shows from like the 60s or 70s or something like that, it's constant where somebody, the dad will come home from his factory job and complain about his hard ass boss.
Yeah.
But he never comes home and says, I got to get out of there. I need to get a different job. And his wife is saying, yeah, you should really have a boss that you get along with. No, nobody cared about this. They didn't factor that in. Whereas now that's a very real thing where it's like, no, I want to fit on a social level, cultural, whatever word you want to use that environment for that environment. That matters to people too. So all the things that you said, all of this internal stuff that is heightened compared to, gritting your teeth and bearing it like was common in the past. It's hard. It all adds up to being very, very difficult.
Yeah. And the point is, I want to sort of preface what the podcast is actually about with that, so that I sort of lay the foundation and the groundwork to provide a level of understanding that this is something that we all agree upon. we all are familiar with, and we all have personal experience with. And it's sort of what we talk about with each other all of the time. The thing that we don't talk about, that I want to talk about here, because I find it interesting we don't talk about it, and we should, because I think having an alternate perspective about this, or having like any more well-rounded perspective on it, can be very, very useful for everyone. Is owning a business can suck really, really bad and be way worse than being an employee of the business. Way, way worse. So the reason I want to bring this up is because I do think that the majority of the conversation that you see about business owners is complaining about a very, very, very small minority of hyper successful business owners that do make gobs and gobs of money that they don't know what to do with, and should treat their employees better, are disconnected from the day-to-day. I mean, there's a whole show on CBS that's run for 1,000 seasons called Undercover Boss, which is the point of this show. The point of this show is that these bosses are completely disconnected from their actual workers who support the business, and they have to go down with like a fake mustache and like a trucker hat in order to like see what it's like to work on a factory floor for one day. Yeah. And that's
what their lives are like too, outside of the job too. Yeah, just what is the experience of being this employee? They do a great job with that. I think it's a really good show in that sense.
It's an excellent show. And I think it does wonders to try to bridge this gap, which is a massive gap that exists between employees and, kind of like the top level executives. That's true. And that exists, and we're all familiar with it. What basically no one talks about, and there are no shows about this, but there's sort of a show secretly about this, which I'll get into, is that the majority of business owners, their life sucks and they go bankrupt. Yes. That's what being a business owner is 9 out of 10 times, maybe more than that, maybe 9.8 out of 10 times. You work constantly. You're totally underappreciated. You make no money, and then you're financially ruined. Like that's the majority case of business ownership.
It's bad in ways that people don't realize. They don't understand those consequences. They don't understand the day by day strain of just so many elements of it. And this is not just giant business. This is like, Elon Musk and Richard Branson. I see in the chat, I see the T-Man is here, right? Dragon's Treasure. He's a great example of somebody who is dealing with the stuff you're talking about, Kevin, because, he doesn't have an operation with 50 employees. It's like, no, he is the primary person, and also has all the negatives of the ownership responsibility and making all the decisions. And when he doesn't wake up and go to work, there is no business that day. It is 100% on somebody like him. And that's very, very similar to almost all the YouTubers we've talked to, where if they don't wake up and work on a video, nothing has happened that day. Like there's a tremendous responsibility there. Whereas if you're an employee, even in a small business, like you call in sick and maybe there's a disruption from that, but not, things don't grind to a halt. The shop is still going to open probably. It would take a really unique scenario for it not to. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff built into this that nobody thinks about and nobody talks about. And that's why I'm excited that you want to, because there's so many oversimplifications on, you see on places like Twitter and whatever, and in conversations with people where they do not have any perspective on how horrible so much of what having a business is. It just is brutal and sucks. And I don't know why people don't think about it for a few minutes, because so many of those sucky things are really obvious.
Yeah, but people don't think about things kind of in general. So that's why I want to think about it here and talk about it with you, because it is hard to just imagine, I guess, for a lot of people, what it is like to, like you said, wake up and you have all of the responsibilities. The first responsibility is that whatever money comes in is used to pay, guess who? Your employees.
Not you.
Not you. Your employees. So you as the employee are going to get paid way, 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 way before the boss. In almost every business, you will always get paid.
The boss is getting it last.
If the boss gets it at all. I mean,
right.
He's
getting it after the phone bill and the electricity and the stock and, depending on the business. Like if you don't have materials, you have no business. If you don't have the food, you have no restaurant. All of these things have to happen before you take home a paycheck.
Whatever loans, business loans that they have, like vendors that they owe, and then any sort of repairs that come up. Oh no, this refrigerator went out. That's another, $3,000 I didn't expect this month, or whatever. This pipe burst. I have to fix that. If you can't blame the landlord or something to cover that, whatever it is, all the costs of business are your costs as the owner, and you are paying them. And meanwhile, the employee is getting their paycheck sort of no matter what, because if they don't, they're gone. They're gone. That's a huge problem. And if someone doesn't show up to work, or someone's a bad employee, or they're stealing from you, or they're causing issues, or they call the cops and now, the cops are at your, whatever it is, like it's all your problem. All of it is your problem. Every single step of this process is your friggin' problem. And I think that one of the major things I wanted to say is that, well, they're keeping the majority of the money, I think, is how most employees think of it. It's like, well, they're making all this money. So, of course they have to deal with more problems. They're being compensated for the amount of responsibility and problems that they have, because they're the owner. They get the majority, the lion's share of the money. And that's one major, major thing that secretly is highlighted in a show called Shark Tank that I wanted to talk about, because I've been watching.
You watch a lot of Shark Tank,
yeah. My wife and I have been going through Shark Tank from season 1, just for fun, because we both really like that show. It's really interesting to see the different types of people that show up and their business ideas, and every element we both find fascinating. But here is the thing that comes up a lot on that show that virtually no one understands, okay? And it's this, okay? Ready? Revenue is not profit, okay? The revenue generated from a business is a completely different number than the profit generated by the business. These are not the same. So if you're a business owner and you own some business, and the business, they're making millions of dollars. This business makes $3 million a year. And you see this happen on Shark Tank all the time. They'll be like, oh, wow, your sales are $3 million. Okay, so what did you make on the $3 million? Actually, we're not profitable yet. We lost $700,000. It's like, that happens all the time. All the time.
And it's actually exactly the same thing that we talk about with creatives. They just aren't losing money. They aren't losing money by making whatever art for so many years. They're losing time, right? So if you think of that money as if it were dollars, you'd be like, we know this is how it works, where you have to put in all this time to do the writing and the videos and the music and all the stuff you're into before you make a buck on it. Well, in a lot of these businesses, like a manufacturing thing that might be on Shark Tank, theirs isn't just mind work and elbow grease. No, they have to pay for facilities. They have to pay for production. They have to pay for legal, things like the patent process. That can get extremely expensive. There's all of this quantitative money stuff that adds up, and you have to get that system going, even if you aren't coming out on top. So yeah, you can have $5 million in sales, which is awesome, but that doesn't mean you have any profit at all. And most of the time, it does mean that you're running at a loss. This is even expected in a lot of things. This was Amazon. You know how long it took for Amazon to be profitable? Wasn't it 20 years? Wasn't it 20 years before Amazon was making money?
I don't know the answer to that, because I find all of that Netflix just constantly loses money. Does YouTube even make money at this point? Do they want to make money? At that level, things get really confusing. But you're right. There are a lot of businesses that will take on venture capital in order to scale. And then at some point, unless they turn a profit, they go bankrupt. That's what happens. Well, I think Uber is another example of a gigantic business that just keeps chomping money. Spotify too. I think Spotify runs at a huge loss, but those are like the most gigantic companies in the world. I think what's really important is to talk more about these smaller companies that you'll see on like a Shark Tank, or that like small businesses that maybe people listening to this podcast will work for, in which they'll come in and they'll say, wow, we did $700,000 in sales this year. That's a lot of money. Oh my gosh. $750,000. Okay. And what did you make on that 700,000? We made $80,000. And okay, did you pay yourselves? No. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, then if you have two 50-50 owners and you made $80,000 that year, then you can afford to each pay yourselves $40,000 that year
before taxes.
And now, since you paid yourself that $40,000 each, that's money you can't reinvest in growing the business. So now you're paying yourself instead of hiring a new employee to help grow the business, to help scale, hiring, a social media coordinator, or like another sales rep, or whatever it is, a web developer. It doesn't matter, whatever your business is, a new, worker for your roofing company, whatever it is, you need that money to grow. But then if you're not really making it money on top of that, it becomes a problem. So you see this question arises. It's like, well, then why would anybody do this? Why would anybody even start a business?
I don't know what you've been sipping, but you've got it all wrong. It's time to commit to the leaf. We've embraced the smoothness and surprising pick-me-up that tea provides. I literally drink it all day long, nearly a gallon a day, and it powers me through research, script writing, and forums on websites that I refuse to name here. But we don't drink normie NPC tea. We drink cultured and refined anime tea from the Dragon's Treasure. Kevin still likes the gunpowder green called Space Cowboy, and I've sampled nearly 40 Dragon's Treasure teas at this point. Lately, I've been slamming black teas like Kentucky Bourbon and liquefied Berserk Despair. Scottish Breakfast is deep and peaty, and I smooth it over with Sebastian's Morning Earl Grey, which has the best vanilla cream taste I think I've ever had in a cup. Give me a pot of that with a hot meatball sub from Sal's Pizza and Brooks Barbecue Chicken to wash down my last meal on death row. I highly recommend the sampler packs. You'll want to try everything just like I did. I literally have not had one tea that I wouldn't be happy to reorder. The Dragon's Wings membership fuels new tea experimentation, and the Tea of the Month Club provides a regularly scheduled surprise. And when you order from the Dragon's Treasure using code CREATE, you'll get 10% off your order. That's 10% off using the code CREATE at thedragonstreasure.com. The link's in the description. It's super irrational in just almost every way. And by the way, I want to say that I was completely wrong on Amazon. It was 9 years. My 20 was a serious exaggeration, but 9 years of losing money is a lot of years to lose money. And that whole time, Jeff Bezos was trying to convince people, yes, this is going to turn around. This is going to eventually pay off. And at that time, too, this was through the dot-com retail bust. There were all sorts of places that just imploded back then because the models didn't work and they didn't pay off. So he was losing money as everybody else was losing money catastrophically. And he was saying, no, but really, I'm different. Amazon is different. And instead of the place that sells pet food and only pet food and somehow can't make it work, I am going to sell everything. So it was originally just books, but no, I'm going to sell everything under the sun and just pretend there's no logistical nightmare there. And I promise this is going to work. Everything about it was horrible on paper. It was so stupid. And it's shocking that even after 9 years, they figured out how to do it. But anyway, all of this is completely irrational. And the little joke about this, and I know that Mark Cuban has said this on Shark Tank a few times. I haven't watched in years, but he said an entrepreneur is somebody who works 80 hours a week so that they don't have to work 40. And that is such an awesome quip because it makes no sense and it makes perfect sense. It's a little bit like what we're talking about. You have to absorb all of this risk. You have to grind to an unreasonable degree. You have to put a shocking amount of stress on your shoulders. And you do this for probably, 90% chance of failure. It's hard in ways that people don't realize. A lot of people who listen to this show are youngish. They don't have marriages, kids, houses, cars to the degree that, a lot of people on Shark Tank do. It's one thing when we talk about some creative endeavor and we say, shoot your shot, put everything you can into it. Hopefully it works out. If it doesn't, you've had a really good time doing your art. Well, that's true. But with the business stuff, it's not just you. Even if you're alone in the world, it's not just you. There are people who pay the price for the risk that you put up and the failures when it goes wrong. The kids and the friends and the boyfriends and girlfriends, parents who are stressed out about you losing everything. I've had booms and busts like 5 times. I mean, Kevin, how many times since we've really known each other have I done well and then been back at zero? And then, do something else and whatever. And I don't mind that. I have a temperament that fits that. I can live with it. And I live in such a way that I can absorb the lows. But it wasn't easy for my parents to see. It was hell on several different relationships where it's like, okay, there's a big difference between somebody being, reasonably successful and having promise and then no, all of a sudden the switch is flipped and you're a bum. That strains personal relationships of all kinds. There's a lot that goes into this, just a lot. And it's everything. And, I went into that, thinking about it like somebody who has a business, what their family and their personal life is like, because that person is also responsible for all of those same things with all the employees they have, all the people they work with. If things are going badly, if you screw up, if you just aren't doing your ownership job properly, your managerial job properly, somebody on the next rung down is going to suffer. This is something that's really good in a show like Kitchen Nightmares, where by default, the staff is small. A restaurant doesn't have 100 people in it. So you get a sense of what the chefs and servers and hosts and hostesses, what their life is like. And, if they got to have a job. If they have kids, they can't have disruptions. And if somebody's running a restaurant or a bar very, very badly, well, not just the owners suffer. And the weight of that on somebody who is not a complete sociopath, which almost everybody in that position does care very deeply about the effects on others that their own actions have and their own failures have. Oh, the guilt is tremendous. It is horrible. I was in a position years ago, this is like 8 years ago, I suppose, where through no fault of my own, I lost a very big contract. It had nothing to do with me. That business had to cancel it. Well, so I find out about this, and it affected the people, a host of contractors that I was working with who had spent 2 years reliably working with me. And all of a sudden I have to say to them, this project is over and I'm so sorry about this. it was not preventable. There were like 8 people who all of a sudden had a loss in income. I wasn't responsible, but at the same time, I was responsible, mm-hmm. And I wouldn't quite describe it as guilt, but it is a form of guilt where it's like, God, this is ultimately on me when it is, and it should be. And also when it's not on me, it's still on me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a weight you do not have as an employee. And it is hard. It is really, really hard.
Yeah. And so one of the things that's been fascinating, and I actually recommend this if this does pique anyone's interest to do this, that we've been doing, is that when you're watching these, so Shark Tank has been around for, okay, wait, if anybody listening doesn't know what Shark Tank is,
isn't it in every country in one version or another now?
Yeah, let me just give like a brief synopsis of it. The point of Shark Tank is that you have these 5 like business tycoons who are extremely successful and wealthy, and they are given the opportunity to invest in what's usually a startup company. So someone will come in and they bake cupcakes or something, and they want to expand their cupcake business. Then, the sharks, one of the sharks can say, all right, I'll give you $300,000 for 30% of your cupcake business, and I'll help you, grow it. That's what Shark Tank is. So one of the things that's been really interesting about rewatching it is, since the show is so old at this point, there has been a lot of runway for stuff to happen afterwards. So you get to see a deal that was made 10 years ago, and then you can just Google what happened,
Yes.
You can see what happened later, because it's been 10 years since they invested in the, baby back ribs business. A lot of the stories are freaking crazy about what happened later. But the thing that I really wanted to mention on the podcast is that, well, 2 things are really fascinating to me about this. One is that even when they make a deal on the show, it rarely closes. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is of deals that close and don't close, but it's high, the deals that don't close. Really, really high. Like, I'll just put it in the 50-50 bucket, but it might even be higher than that. It might even be like 60% don't close and then 40% close. For whatever reason, you'll never know. None of us will ever know. That's like, behind closed doors negotiating, and for whatever reason, they don't actually do the deal. So that's one thing that's really interesting about the show, is that the deal that they're all excited about and they high-five each other over and they hug doesn't even actually happen. The other thing that's really important for the purposes of this discussion is that virtually all of those businesses are out of business now. Virtually all of them are dead. No matter how successful they were when they went into the tank, the huge boost in sales that they got, in the weeks following their appearance on the show, a lot of them have a good run in which, they were generating millions of dollars for 3, 4, 5, 6 years after the show, and then they closed their doors. And they could close their doors for any number of reasons, but quite obviously, the main reason is that they weren't making enough money to continue staying in business, regardless. And this is the one thing about that show that I find disingenuous. I get why they don't do this. Okay. I get why they don't do this. But when the business people walk in to get, a shark interested in them, it's always, what do you make the product for? What are your margins? What do you take home? What was your profit? They always want to know what the profit is, because that's what the business is actually worth. Almost, there are some industries in which things like revenue matter more, can matter in some regard.
Yeah.
Instead of profit.
These are exceptions.
Those are exceptions, though. You have like some crazy IP and some crazy patent or whatever, and like, the potential of it.
Potential.
The potential of it
potential
is like,
has value.
Has crazy value that you will pay through the nose for. But for the most part, a business is worth a small multiplier of its profit. So if you make $300,000 a year and you do get, a 4x profit, okay, you're worth 1.2 million, whatever. The thing
that's a lot of money, but yeah.
The thing that they never, yeah, but if you're bringing in $300,000 a year, then you can make that investment back, in 4 years. It makes sense. And now you're making that, $300,000 a year yourself and putting it in your pocket. But they never, ever, ever mention profit in the updates. Never. They roast these people when they're standing there about what their profit is on the business. But you'll notice when they talk about how wildly successful the business is later, all they talk about is sales. And even on the show, they will say it can be a bad thing to blow up your sales. Because now all of a sudden you have to you have to have an insane amount of cash flow and liquid capital in order to just pay for the inventory that you're selling through. That's kind of like a more of a deeper dive discussion. But my point is that in the updates they'll be like, before Shark Tank we did $300,000 in sales. Since Shark Tank we've done 3 million. It's like, okay, guys, what are you making on 3 million? They'll never tell you that ever, ever, ever. And then it goes out of business. And it's like, okay, guys, there is a bit of like a disingenuous element to you fluffing yourselves later on these businesses. It's like really pie in the sky and disingenuous.
Yeah. And even if you have profit, you mentioned something about this a little earlier. People are extremely expensive. Employees are extremely expensive. So expanding or even just making your life a little bit more comfortable by having an additional person in the mix requires a substantial amount of profit. So that's just on the people side. But if things are going well, you do have to do things that support that growth. Sometimes it's actual equipment. Sometimes it's a bigger place, a more convenient place. I mean, this is hard to describe because there's such a tremendous difference between like a retail operation where, your storefront location matters, that can be everything, versus, something that has no interfacing with customers, like, in that same sense. So it's very different, but like, think about it as if you had a business doing what you wanted to do. I don't know let's say you're editing videos and you're decent at it. You get to a point where you can get paid for your work. Well, it's going very well and you need a better machine and you need a real good one. Personally, I suggest Main Gear, but you have options in the marketplace. But really at a point you've got to drop, $3,000 on a really good machine because your work has succeeded to the point that not only warrants that, but demands it because you are unable to keep up with, your MacBook Air, right? So you finally get some profit that you immediately have to spend. You have to get rid of it. Is that really profit? Well, for the business, yes, it is. It is. The business is getting better and the business is getting healthier. Your life may be exactly the same because that money is not going to you. Not yet. So there's a really little micro example of how this works. And that's just you as a video editor who's a freelancer and trying to make that into an actual business. Well, I described one single purchase that would wipe out like 2 months of your profit, potentially. And there's a lot more beyond just the one computer. And you haven't even begun to think about getting anybody else to subcontract on some of the things that would make your edits faster and better. Kevin and I know some people who do this where like they handle the really heavy duty stuff and, they have subcontractors that do some of the more mundane elements. Well, you have to be in a really good position to be able to afford them. You have to make a lot of money just to get by and expand here. And the whole time you're hoping that success is sustainable. Things run their course in a whole bunch of businesses. There's a thing on Twitter about cupcake places being money laundering fronts like 10 years ago. I mean, I don't know if I believe any of this, right? But it made me think like, hey, cupcakes were the biggest thing in the world for like 3 years. Every Food Network show seemed to be about the cupcake wars. And, when I would go places, I was doing a lot of travel in places like Las Vegas back then. And it was like every place had a big, ye old cupcake factory. Well, I don't remember the last time I saw a cupcake place. Maybe in an airport like 3 years ago, I might have seen a cupcake kiosk, but that's dead. And it's not like people stopped baking good cupcakes. I'm sure the cupcakes were fantastic. I don't know, but cupcakes had their run. Just culturally, we pulled back from cupcakes, and it probably would be a tough sell to open up a cupcake shop right now.
That happened with Dunkin' Donuts. It's not Dunkin' Donuts anymore. It's just Dunkin'.
Oh, right.
They purposely changed their name to Dunkin' and brand themselves really more as a Starbucks competitor, a coffee place, than a donut place, because donuts just are not that popular anymore, which is crazy.
It's not what it used to be.
Donuts are delicious. Who doesn't like a donut? But like when we were kids, and this is a regional thing, so I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't know, have never even seen a Dunkin' Donuts. But let me explain to you that when we were kids, Dunkin' Donuts had these little boxes called Munchkins, and they were little
Munchkins were amazing.
They were
donut
these
holes.
Little donut holes, and you would get an assortment of little donut holes. This little box, it'd be like a powdered donut hole, a chocolate, it'd be like a jelly and a glazed or something. I think that was a general spread.
Wasn't it like 50 in a box though?
That's what everyone would bring in for their birthday when I was a kid. Like in elementary school, you would get a box of Munchkins. That was like the birthday thing. Is that still a thing? I don't know. I'm no longer in kindergarten, so I don't know like what people are bringing into kindergarten for Julie's birthday. But
they get dehydrated carrot sticks. I think that's the only thing allowed at this point. We want to help you make something and mean something. And we say that phrase all the time because when you're making something and you know it means something, even if it's just to you, that's when you feel pretty good about what you're creating. The support for the Create Unknown in recent weeks has been incredible. Animators, artists, musicians, YouTubers, aspiring filmmakers, comedians, it is crazy how talented everybody in this community is. Consider joining the Create Unknown Patreon. Every dollar that comes through goes straight into the podcast and its community. That means more highlights videos. It means a big Minecraft project that's on the way. And eventually we'd like to manufacture custom piss bottles so you never have to leave your battle station. And being a patron unlocks participation in all of our live recordings. You've seen the roster of guests we've had. Having access to their minds is a unique opportunity. You can go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown or click the link that's in the description. Every little bit helps, and your support means absolutely everything to us. Patreon.com/thecreateunknown, links in the description. We appreciate you, Space Cowboys.
But yes, times change. Blockbuster Video's out of business for a reason. So yeah, even when you're wildly successful and just the market landscape changes, you're donezo. And but the biggest thing to me is like earlier I said, then like why do it? Like why even start a business? And one of the reasons for many of these businesses, and the reason to not pay yourself and the reason to continue to grind, is to sell the business eventually. That's the payday. So that's something that I think a lot of people also don't understand, is that the point of a lot of businesses is to sell the business. That's what is that's the goal of being the owner, is you're not paying yourself all those years, or you're paying yourself just enough to like squeak by in the hopes that one day you do get this big payday. That's the carrot at the end of the stick. But that's rare. It's so freaking hard to sell
the
a
exit
business.
strategy. The exit strategy is an actual part of a business plan. Even before you have begun the business, you are thinking about the end game. And if you're trying to get any kind of investment, that's an appealing thing, because it's like, hey, this is where the investment's going to pay off. Because most people think of starting a business that they want to do for a long time. It's what they enjoy. And this is a critical thing. You mentioned this lack of understanding of the difference between revenue and profit. The other one to me is the difference between having a business and making a job for yourself. They are shockingly different things. So, Kevin, you're part of the Curiosity Box. That's been a business for 6 years now, something like that?
7, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
7 years.
If you get hit by a bus tomorrow, the Curiosity Box doesn't go away.
No.
That is still a business. That is still a product that will happen. That is a business. Now, everything I do and have done for quite nearly 20 years now, 19 years, I suppose, is some extension of mind work, writing, editing. Just 100% coming from me. And that's something that's very hard to scale. Training somebody to be me is a tough thing to do. If I get hit by a bus, my business is splattered on the sidewalk. All right. And there's no scraping it back up and putting it back together. Like, that is the end of the business. If I am sick on Tuesday and I don't work, business is closed. There is no business. There is just a job for me. Right. And that is a critical difference. Most people, when they think, oh, I want to start a business, is I want to make my own job. And that's cool. I mean, I obviously enjoy my life and I feel good about where most of that life has gone. But I am under no illusion that I have built a business. I can't sell me. Well, I can, and that's exactly what being an employee is. I can be an employee. You know what I mean? But that distinction is tremendous. And when people think about ownership and running a business and all of that, they really have to think about which of those two scenarios is in their mind. They just have to. It's not the same thing, and we've talked about it in YouTube terms, where it's really important to get people like editors and, whatever people to do things, because then there's something happening even when you're not working. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's happening when you're asleep because somebody's on a different continent. Maybe you're just plain sick, and at least there's some progress that day because other people are doing stuff. Well, then you are dangerously close to having a business. But yeah, having a business is just not the same thing as having a job that you have created for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would call what you just described almost more like a little machine. It's still really not a business. There are definitely steps to this. It's like job you make yourself, and then little machine, which is not a technical term, but I think it's sort of illustrative. And then eventually you can get into business. Like you said, like Curiosity Box. That's a business. I could get drone striked here where I sit right now. And there will still be...
You could die of smoke inhalation. Canadian smoke inhalation.
Yeah, which I am on the verge of. But that will definitely continue. So, one other thing that I wanted to say about selling the business that is possible is that if you do somehow manage to build a strong enough business that someone else wants to purchase it from you, and you do get this payday in some sense, okay, wow, I got this payday. You also you really need to contextualize the payday and hope that it's more than you would have been paid had you just worked another job that whole time. So, like, if it took you 10 years to build this business in order to sell it for X amount of dollars, is X amount of dollars actually more than you would have just accrued over that 10 years doing some other job for someone else? That's a real question.
Yeah, it's the opportunity cost question. And that's one where I have failed spectacularly on that exact score. If I had just taken a proper job and I don't know, just kind of worked it and been somewhat sensible with my money, I would be retired right now. I straight up would have enough money to where I would not have to work because I live very simply. I know what my costs are and what my expectations for life are. I would 100% not have to work at 40. Well,
if you just been a mailman, didn't we talk about that recently? Just been a mailman.
Yes. Literally anything that's like around the median income. So not low, but not anything spectacular. Throw in a little bit of compound interest and life is real good after 20 years. Charles just says in the chat, I've got a cousin who retired at 45 as a mailman. Yeah. That kind of thing is totally possible. And so you look at all of these scenarios where you just do a thing for a while and then you're good. Life is good. Well, why go through all this other stuff, which is almost certain to land you in ruin? Even when it pays off, it is such a terrible slog in the meantime that the payoff doesn't make up for what you've put into it. I mean, it is totally irrational. There's a reason why people have this conception of successful business owners as being a bit mentally off in all sorts of different ways. You have to be irrational, and you have to be comfortable with risk in ways that a lot of people aren't. It's very hard to be a normal person and build a business. It doesn't add up very well. Everything about this is bad. I mean, and it's crazy because we've almost done 200 episodes now where we talk about how amazing it is.
Well, that's the point of this episode, though, is that's all anyone talks about. Like, we are obsessed with the outliers of people who are like freakishly successful, and without ever addressing the fact that they're outliers. Like, it's super freaking hard to be outrageously successful, whether you're a YouTuber or you manufacture designer furniture or you own your own dentistry practice. I don't know, whatever it is, it could be anything. It's super hard to be really successful as the owner of that. And there are so many like terribly tragic cases. There was a case on Shark Tank where believe me, they did not follow up with this guy, in which a guy mortgaged his house, emptied his children's college savings, borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars from his parents who also mortgaged their house, and his business flopped hard, failed miserably. And guess what? He just financially ruined himself and everyone he loves. Yay! Great job.
For the chance at a payoff that was the equivalent of just plain being a mailman for 20 years.
Probably with the actual tiny chance of this payoff that everyone obsesses over, in which you become, a multimillionaire.
Yeah. You have to get through all of this and to make it work. You really have to like the thing that you're doing. You have to like something about it. To the point where there is an obsession. I know I complained about this weeks ago, how stupid that phrase is. If you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And it being the opposite, that if you do what you love, you are constantly working and you never stop. You have to have that kind of commitment and enjoyment. And think about the things that we've talked about over the years now, and some of the people we've talked to, where, like Kevin and I like playing with ideas. We like thinking about how to present ideas to people in a way that makes sense and in a way that they like. We really enjoy that process and the challenge of it. And when, things don't go well, something doesn't do well, that's part of it, where it's like, okay, let's think again about how to do this. And that's happened many different times. We're okay with that challenge because we like that situation. Psychic Pebbles was excellent at describing the process of crafting funny things. I guess I'd put it that way. Where I remember him saying how, you work on an animation or something for a month, is the joke still funny? the 900th time you've heard it. Do you still appreciate it? That's a really different thing from coming up with a funny joke. You have to have a commitment to that thing. And when you do, that's really the payoff. You are getting that payoff in real time the whole time. It is separate from the results. Now, like Kevin said, the results are almost always bad. When they're good, they're rarely that good. The best case scenario is usually very mundane, and only one out of a trillion people actually, whoever came up with this scrub daddy has done quite nicely. Congratulations to them.
I was going to say that there's like a handful of Shark Tank businesses that we all know for a reason, because there's like 5 of them
Squatty Potty
have been like wildly successful. So we know, like the Ring Cam and Squatty Potty and Sponge Daddy or whatever. And the
Scrub Daddy.
The other the other like 997 of them failed miserably,
ruined lives,
or they chugged along at a clip for a while and then they fizzled out.
It ran its course.
Just ran its course.
Yeah. There's a life cycle on all of this stuff, and we're going to be part of that life cycle too. In 10 years, YouTube videos are probably not going to be quite the thing they are right now, especially we got a glimpse yesterday of where things are headed with Apple's new, whatever it's called.
Vision Pro?
AR, VR,
Goggle glass is what I like to call it.
Goggle glass. Yeah. I mean, just whatever content is on that kind of thing and whatever in the future is going to be different than what we're dealing with now. So things do run their course. They have a cycle that you may not even be interested in adapting to. You may not be able to, even if you want to. Mm-hmm. There are all these crazy forces that just make it suck real bad, and it's something you have to do to see if you enjoy it. Do it on a light scale, and that's the giant theme. The giant theme, I think, because we are at a point now where we're thinking about what has emerged over 190 episodes of this podcast, however many it is. We have perspective and some distance to reflect on those things. And one of those huge themes is the gap between ideas and execution. And having good ideas and thinking about stuff it just doesn't even matter much. It doesn't matter much. Everybody has really good ideas. And even a lot of really bad ideas work just fine. Mm-hmm. The ideas are not really the issue. The issue is the execution. Do you have the skills to do the thing? Do you have the temperament to do the thing? Do you have a life that supports whatever that thing is? Can your idea and your job and business and whatever it is absorb the normal things that happen in life? When somebody gets sick, somebody dies, you get in a car accident, what happens there? So the real meat of this is on the execution. And as much as I want to say that the mind game on the other side is everything, I would just be lying, and I do regret a little bit some of the seminars that I gave in the past where they could have been 30 seconds long. They literally could have been 30 seconds, where instead of 90 minutes, where there was an hour of presenting something and then 30 minutes of Q&A, I could have said, whatever idea you've got right now is good enough. Even if it's bad, it's good enough. Do the thing and see how it goes. And then I go back to the green room and eat my body weight in cookies. Like, there's no event if that happens, right? So I get why it can't, but there's no substitute. There's no substitute. Can you handle any of the things that we have just talked about? Maybe you think you can. You have to find out. You don't even know what they are. We touched on 2% of them. And there is stuff that Kevin and I have not encountered yet that we don't even know about. It's that Rumsfeld thing where it's like the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown knowns and the unknown unknowns. You find out what those are just by getting into it. And maybe you can't handle it. Maybe you can't face the prospect of $100,000 of debt. Maybe you can't handle your paycheck servicing that debt every month, if you have the paycheck at all. Maybe you can't handle your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or husband kind of wanting you to have a real paycheck so that they can live life too. You can have a life together. Maybe they don't like paying the bills in the meantime. Maybe they don't think your thing is going to pay off on the timeline that you as a relationship need it to pay off. You don't know this until you're there, right?
There was a guy on Shark Tank yesterday that lost his fiance over starting a business. The parents wouldn't. Oh, yeah. The parents would not let their daughter marry this guy who was trying to start this business instead of having a stable job. That was it.
Yep.
And he stuck with the business and he lost the girl. He married somebody else. That was, I guess, a better fit for his life as an entrepreneur. But these are the real risks. Yeah. They're as real as they get.
Yes. Yeah. And I faced that same sort of thing at least twice where, my lack of stability was a bad fit for another person. And it's not like they were wrong for not being comfortable with that. It's like, no, it's just, this is not what you want. And you do have to make that decision. It's like, which is more important to me? This life that I have chosen and I'm developing, or this relationship that I'm in? And it doesn't have to be romantic. It can be friendships. Like the sheer hours that it takes to do this stuff takes a serious toll on friendships and hanging out. There's a reason why the friend groups for YouTubers are almost exclusively other YouTubers online. Like most of the people we know don't have the IRL circle of friends that they did before YouTubing. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even there was a man, I can't remember her name. One of the sharks in the more recent seasons did a panel that I witnessed for a YouTube event. I think her name is Emma Greed. Ironically, her last name is Greed. No, Greer. Greer? Emma Greer? Shark Tank?
Shark Tank. Emma Greed, Greede. Yeah, I don't know who this is.
Emma Greed. She talked
fashion brand.
She discussed exactly what you just said. She talked about, like having to sacrifice friendships and relationships and seeing her kids as much as she would like to, like all of this stuff. But she's a multimillionaire and like she chose that life and she's wildly successful and good for her. Like that she is not who we're talking about for this podcast. She's really not. She is the 1% of the 1% of the 1% who still has problems. Everyone has problems, but lamenting the problems of a billionaire is not what I want to do on this podcast at all. What I want to do instead is just create a little bit of a potential paradigm shift for people who are employees to recognize that it's not the worst place to be. It's not the worst place to be to have a consistent paycheck, to not worry about the risks of the business, to not worry about someone suing the business because, they fell down in the bathroom or something and now they're going to, sue the hell out of them, to not worry about paying for the workers' comp insurance or some new form of insurance that the state you're in has just instituted that all of a sudden is going to cost you an extra $15,000 you weren't expecting, whatever it is. Like there is an endless list of these things. And yes, like on an anecdotal level, maybe you find this conversation that we're having annoying. Maybe you're in a situation or a circumstance in which the person whom you work for does nothing all day and they take all the money like Scrooge McDuck themselves in their vault and they have like 17 boats. Yes, like that's possible. Those exist. Those people exist. Absolutely. There are people at almost every rung of every job that pretty much do nothing all day and get paid for it. while like a tiny
I could rifle off 50 names of people with fake jobs right now. Almost everybody I deal with could be combined in like one motivated person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are entire fake industries that exist. But the purpose is that it's not the worst thing in the world to be able to clock out at 5 p.m. and not think about work again until the next day, and not get any phone calls, not get any emails. There's no emergencies. There's no XYZ happened, and now you have to figure out what to do next. There's nothing. You go to happy
There's no
hour.
stress about anybody else's life.
You meet up with your friends. You get some appetizers at Applebee's. Endless
Applebee's.
boneless rib bones. 2 for Tuesdays, and you go home, and that's it. You're done. That's not horrible.
Yeah. Oh, no, it really isn't. And I've absolutely thought, did I just completely blow it? Did I do this completely wrong? And I'm not sure. Maybe I did. There are definitely times where I wish I had taken a route that was a lot closer to that. I don't know, because it's impossible to know how any of that would have turned out. But it's really important to understand and appreciate what Kevin just described, where you go home and for almost all jobs, that's really the end of it. There's not much of anybody else's life on your shoulders. There's no real stress. You are subject to a lot of those things. If a business goes out of fashion, the market changes, whatever, you may very well lose your job. Well, hey, that does happen in the world, and then you have to find a new job. But I just don't know. I don't know how to get more people to understand what's actually happening on that ownership side, because everything I see seems to misunderstand it. And somebody in the chat mentioned, landlords and, renting versus owning. It's really quite similar. And Kevin, you and I have talked about this over the years, where it's like renting is amazing, even if rent is high, because you don't have to deal with any problems ever at all. And when you are a homeowner, you are responsible all of a sudden for literally everything. There's no calling the super and then the super figures it out. There is, Jesus Christ, what do I do? Can I fix it, or do I have to call somebody to fix it? What's the cost of either one of those things? Even if somebody else is coming to fix it, usually you have to do something in the meantime to mitigate the problem. It's completely different. How many times have we lost like half days or nights where some idiot house problem has come up that we only deal with because we're not renting in that way?
Well, and also just people that I know, people that I'm close with, have had home issues in which, like, a little leak. Yeah, there's just a little leak, a little bit of water getting in turns into like a $30,000 problem, like $30,000, because all of a sudden walls are being ripped out and things are being rebuilt.
Well, look at Cody. Look at old history Cody. You remember that story he had about the flooding and whatever?
Yeah.
That's a little bit different, but he had to figure out what to do about all of it. It wasn't a case of, calling it in and crossing your fingers and doing your best to shake the water off the sleeping bag in the basement. No. All of a sudden, he had a massive, massive, massive emergency problem that was on him. And that's one of the differences between renting something and owning. The
difference is not my problem versus all my problem. That's a really big difference. Not my problem or all my problem.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. All my problem is fatiguing because it never goes away. Even when you've solved the problem, you are super fatigued from solving the problem. And then you go to the next problem on the list. That list never ends. It never, ever, ever ends. When you're successful, the list can be even longer. When you're hyper successful, It's a list of bullshit that is it just happens to be very different than the list of bullshit you had when you were a pauper.
Pauper.
They're different lists, but they're both lists. Well, you like pulling out the pauper for that.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the Prince and the Pauper. It's the only time I hear that word used.
Yeah, and guess what? The Prince and the Pauper both had lists of bullshit that sucked.
Right. That was the point of that story, yes.
Yeah.
That's the entire point of the story. That was then remade a million times with different other movies and everything.
Oh, and I'm sure we'll get comments from people on this. Just, being like, no, business owners are greedy and exploit my labor. Okay, if you believe that, take your skills and your labor and do it yourself.
Become a business owner then. Yeah,
that's right.
It's the same argument that I didn't understand we had a few weeks ago about the person like upset that they could no longer have this log cabin in the woods. It's like, well, you could go build it. You want to build your own log cabin? You want to saw your own logs?
Yep.
Have at it. No one's stopping you.
Nobody is stopping you.
No one is stopping you.
Absolutely nobody is stopping you.
You want to start your own business? Go for it. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take, even on Shark Tank, Barbara Corcoran always tells the same story about how she started her business with $1,000. She was a waitress. She waited tables. She saved up $1,000. And that's how she started her business. Can you save up $1,000? Can you save up $10,000? Start a business. Good luck.
I started mine with $7. It literally was $7 to do the web hosting for a year back in the day. It was some promotion, where it's like free domain name plus, web hosting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I want to do writing stuff. I'll make a website and I'll put writing on it. And then I had to write a lot of stuff for a couple of years before I made any money from it. But yeah, $7. Like at the time that was a value meal at McDonald's supersized. It was 3 gallons of gas. I don't know. What else is $7? 11% of a video game. I don't know.
something
a
paperback
like
that.
Book.
Right.
But yeah, you can do 1,000 and almost everybody who does lawn care stuff has that kind of story where it's like, yeah, I had a push lawnmower that I got for, $100 and I made a little bit of money and then I got a better mower and then, it just goes on. And eventually they have a crew of guys. So they're not, mowing every lawn themselves and it builds. It's totally possible. And everything we talk about costs virtually nothing for you to start. Especially now where phones are 100% viable for making any kind of content in a way that they weren't even when we started this podcast.
True. Totally true. Yeah. Because after all, what is a business is you are providing some sort of value that other people are willing to pay for. That's it. That's the whole thing. Someone somewhere along the line is willing to give you some money for some sort of product or service that you can give to them. That's all it is. Yep. It's not any more complicated than that. That's the whole thing.
Mm-mm.
Whether it's cutting people's hair or building websites or mowing lawns.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want this understanding of I am being exploited unfairly to be compared with the experience of you being the exploiter of yourself. Okay. Which that's really what starting a business is. You get to exploit your one employee exactly as much or as little as you want to, because that employee is you. You can treat them like shit. You can treat them very well. That's up to you.
Right. You are instantly oppressor and oppressed.
That's
instantly.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Right. What a magic trick.
Yeah. But it does mean you get to experience both sides of that equation simultaneously, also with perfect information on both sides. Nobody's hiding anything from you in that scenario.
No.
Yeah. So make your terrible tweets. Complain about the world and everybody in it. Complain about the horrible situations you're in. Just get them out of your system and then schedule a bunch of them too. Okay. Just schedule them for the future so that you can get to work on your thing and still complain.
Yeah.
And then as they pop out, you may have a change of heart once you get what's actually going on here. And you may not even remember them because you won't have time to sit around pissing your life away on Twitter, because you will be neck deep in the horrors of starting and owning a business.
Yeah, I think that's it's a good sentiment to leave off on.
Yep. Yep.
Well, yeah, so I expect a plethora of anecdotal angry comments. So,
Yes.
Good luck. Get those out of your system. Yeah, we'll enjoy those. Since, people deal almost solely in the anecdotal now, and no one can actually think in synthesized general thoughts, which will...
I am prepared to refute every single one. Let's go.
Which might be its own Vsauce 2 episode someday. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sort of working on that idea.
Playing with it.
All right. Well, we hope that you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll be back next week. Ducky in the episode chat just posted the old man yells at cloud meme. So I don't think at this point, that we can really get away with finishing one of these podcasts without that meme surfacing. So
no, and it's right now outside. We are under one giant cloud.
Yeah. If I could yell, I would, but my voice is too damaged from the smoke cloud.
All the black coffee and Pall Mall cigarettes, unfiltered.
What is that? That's me?
That's the that's the woman who's in her 53rd year of working at the diner.
Oh, okay. I like that woman. It's a good woman.
Yeah. And if you can't get the unfiltered Pall Malls, you just snap the filter off.
Oh,
just it's a raw smoke it.
Oh my gosh. I one of the restaurants that I worked in, the owner was a smoker, and there was no time for a smoke break, but he needed to smoke. And this man, I could watch this man devour a cigarette in seconds in a way that is absolutely revolting. Like, the thing went from like freshly lit to at the butt in seconds. He just sucked the thing down to the nub and then got back to work. It was crazy. And
it just left that just the ash sticking out.
It's like the Looney Tune cartoon when someone dashes away so fast, it's just an outline of smoke of their body. Yeah, it was just like an outline of the cigarette that had been fully intact like 7 seconds prior. Yeah.
Yeah, I do feel for the people who are too young to have stories like that, where you just watch these disastrous people doing things that you didn't think were possible with any kind of body. It's like, oh, your lungs are like shriveled raisins, and then you see somebody in 2 inhales.
Yeah,
it's like 2 inches of cigarette ash for each one.
Yeah, it's like you're a human vacuum cleaner, and you just sucked through an entire cigarette in 10 seconds. Like, wow, I didn't know people could do that, but there you go. And that guy was really stressed out. He had a really successful business that went out of business. So I guess that's probably a better place to end.
That's the ending.
That's the ending of this one. All right, we'll be back next week. Thanks to all of our patrons. Love seeing you here in the Discord chat. If you want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/thecreateunknown so that you can support more of these paradigm shifting conversations. Until then, we'll see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week, and the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. Thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Farrakhan, Jen Mefasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahim, Natsu, Penny Peddler, Risebread, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Videoger. And a tremendous shout out to our elite baby gang commanders: Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight, Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, Chelxies, and of course, Trevstead. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer-editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yoshua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it. And a special thanks to Main Gear for powering all of our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.